want us up there? Is that what you're saying?
I'm Fran from KTWH Radio.
Hi.
We're broadcasting right now a little pre-game show for the event tonight.
A little
pre-game show, so to speak, our little joke.
Right. So what brings you to
This is, I don't know if you can hear KERRI, but she's just talking to a couple of the attendees here.
Advocates to the hilt.
Okay.
But it has an important application in terms of if you design homes and build them right, you can make it more than pay for itself and do lots of other good things.
So you've really got messages more for developers and like
Construction
city council.
and
Okay.
people that are
Sounds
making a
good.
decision about what kind of housing to build.
All right.
And you can pay traditional rates now, or you can pay 11% more, and you can have no energy costs and save everybody wonderful good
Okay,
things.
I may wind my way back here. So
We would love to
that's
see you,
wonderful.
so
So
thank
you can.
But, you know, our main focus here is there isn't enough, and
Yeah.
what are we going to do about that?
Yes.
But
And then when you build, right?
you want to build them
smart.
right, build them smart, build them green.
All right.
We'll try to say that.
Okay, that was KERRI Miller with a little conversation with a couple of the attendees here who come with a mission of promoting green housing, green energy applications with housing. And of course, housing access and affordable housing is the main issue of the forum and presenting itself to Two Harbors these days, as KERRI pointed out. But 6:59, and keeping an eye on the front here. We'll get a signal when they're about to start. We may have some more time to fill here. Paul, you have anything you'd like to share with the listening audience? KTWH, this is just a little pre-show before the official MPR broadcast begins. And with your history as a city councilor and especially still important role on the HRA,
I do have a couple things to say. I think there's a lot of ways for the local area to get money for housing. One is I just threw it out at House Child tonight, a 2.25% local option sales tax for the county. Another is to put a fee of maybe $5 a night on short-term rentals. And another is to possibly have the lodging tax be used for housing besides all the other things.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so we have about 30 seconds here before we're going to turn it over to KERRI Miller and so forth. So I will probably leave it at that. Thank you, Paul. I hope you get a chance to speak with KERRI during the event as well. Yeah. Here we go. I'll sign off and turn it over to Kitty and KERRI, and hopefully you don't have too much dead air in between.
Give an introduction. Are there any questions before we kind of roll for air that anybody has? Yes, we edit. There was a guy who wanted to know if you could swear last week. I said yes, we can bleep them out if you must. Is anything anybody else wants to know? Okay. All right.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. What a nice turnout. Very gratifying. I told them I know how to plan a party. So thanks for being here. So about 15 years ago, I started as a reporter on the North Shore for several different magazines and newspapers that you guys, some of you, are well aware of. And since that time, I have been writing about and reporting on a couple of things: a housing shortage, a workforce shortage, and how we can support elders in our community. And it seemed to me that all of those things were related to housing. The silver tsunami is coming. It's still coming. And some of us in the room are painfully aware of that, because we're getting there, right? What are we going to do about housing for elders? How can we support them and keep them in our communities and keep them healthy and strong and contributing? What are we going to do about the workforce housing that we have to have a strong economy? So I have a lot of questions as a reporter, and I invited you guys here tonight with the help of KERRI asking the questions in the hopes that we can come up with even more answers. Thanks, you guys.
I'm Carrie Miller. We're here at Castle Danger Brewery in Two Harbors, Minnesota, with a room full of good, lively, opinionated citizens and a lot of good people who are serving the community, too, with a lot of great ideas. So I know this is going to be a lively conversation about affordable housing. This town hall is part of an ongoing series called The Rural Voice, and we are really grateful for the support of our sponsors. They've made it possible. The Northland Initiative Foundation, the Otto Bremer Foundation, Compeer, the Center for Rural Policy and Development, Minnesota Public Radio, and Cherry Road Media. Tim Penny, the former congressman, kicked the whole thing off in January of 2022 when he complained to my friend over there that the media just really didn't care about rural issues. And she said, "Au contraire, Tim, you need to think big." So here we are with you. We're in season 2 of The Rural Voice. Here's how it works. We travel to rural towns in the Midwest. We gather a group of committed citizens together, and then we listen as you use creativity and imagination and dedication to find solutions for challenges that confront the community. So we want to hear great ideas, solution-based kinds of suggestions, and your stories about your own personal experience about what this has been like to try to find housing, friends who have wanted to move here, employers who are trying to get people to move here. So I am all about the anecdote, and I will also tap into the expertise in the room as well. So it's a challenge, of course. Affordable housing is a challenge that many, many communities are confronting. We think when this airs on Minnesota Public Radio, there will be many people in other towns that find common cause with what we're talking about tonight. Of course, without affordable housing, you can't attract a vibrant workforce, you can't support entrepreneurs, or keep young families in the area, or nourish the deep community roots that senior citizens have planted. But there simply is not enough affordable housing in the state of Minnesota. I've been talking to some of you before we've gotten started, and I know that is a situation that is occurring here. So we're here because Two Harbors is a community in a region that I know is debating and experimenting with some intriguing housing potential ideas. But I think the area around the community is also wrestling with this. Maybe somebody up in Silver Bay has a great idea the Two Harbors wants to hear, et cetera, et cetera. So I will be talking to people from throughout the region. I want to hear from families who are on the hunt for a great house or an apartment that they can afford. I want to talk about proposals for senior living, like the one that has been discussed in Crystal Bay Township. I want to hear from senior citizens who are worried that they may not be able to afford their housing. And I'd love to hear from anybody who knows of a family member, I think this applies to Kitty, who would like to move here and just cannot find an affordable place to live. So we're going to talk about zoning and how permitting affects this. We're going to hear from people who are afraid that they're being priced out of the homes that they own. So I have a question for anyone who lives in the region who right now, or maybe over the course of the last year or so, has been out there trying to find an affordable house or apartment. Can you tell me what it's been like? Kitty? If you'll raise your hand. All right. Yes, sir. Paul, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Kerri. I'm Paul Peltier. I'm the executive director of an organization called RAMS. It's the Range Association of Municipalities and Schools. The whole TAA is a 7-county region in the northeastern part of Minnesota here. And for the last 15 years, I've been a band and choir teacher at small rural schools in Minnesota. And when this job opened up, I thought, great, it's going to be awesome. But going from a house that we had with a 2.5% mortgage to now a new house in a new community with a over 7.5% mortgage is a really big burden for us and our 4 kids. My wife and I, we have 4 kids. And we chose to live in the city of Virginia, which is undergoing a major housing anti-renaissance. It's really hard to find a house in Virginia. We had 3 homes that we could possibly afford that were purchased not by us, but straight up with cash way before we could even attempt to close on it. And we had to rely on my parents, who are over 65, to help us out and even come close to closing a deal in a timely fashion. The Iron Range and the Taconite Assistance Area is the 7-county northeastern area of Minnesota, and housing needs a big bet. Housing needs a major moonshot right now. And the more we can come together, realize that everybody's problem is everybody's problem, we're going to solve it together.
Paul, excellent. It's almost like I planted you there. That was so good. Oh my God. Greg, I'm coming over to you because you are an employer, a pretty big employer in the area. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Greg Gruberg, CEO of Lakeview Hospital here in Two Harbors. I'm also the VP at St. Luke's in Duluth. Here in Two Harbors, we employ about 150 people. And we've had a couple of recent challenges. Number one, workforce. I could talk about for 2 hours, but I'll spare you those discussions. But what comes along with workforce is housing. So we have growth plans in our future, both to stabilize both Two Harbors and Silver Bay, and then grow and add additional services in Two Harbors. I'm really concerned about our ability to do so around workforce, number one. And then number two, if we're fortunate enough to hire somebody in a specialty like an infusion therapy clinic or a surgery department, them finding a house is very difficult. I'll share 2 examples. We have a new physician we just hired at our clinic. We recruited about 1.5 years ago, signed and waited for that person to start. Now they're looking for a house in Two Harbors, and they can't find one. So they want to start a family. And he said the same thing that Paul said, is he's made a couple of offers to find out pretty quickly that he's been outbid with cash only, inspections waived, and they're told him, you're out of luck, go look somewhere else. So that has not worked. Our goal is always to get our providers, physicians, nurse practitioners, surgeons to live in our community, to support our community. They're forced to live in Duluth and surrounding areas and drive here, and we hope that they stay. We hope that they kind of weather the storm and find a house that they want. The second challenge we had is we hired a nurse, and RNs are very difficult to come by now for all areas, med-surg, surgery, infusion. We had a nurse signed, took a signing bonus, started with us, had a house all set to go between Two Harbors and Duluth, was outbid with a cash-only offer after failing at many other attempts. Finally took a job about 50 miles away and said, I'm done, I can't make the drive, I'm moving to that community and trying to find a place there. So again, we went back to a travel nurse to fill that opening, and they also need short-term housing, which is difficult. So even when you have one problem come up, that problem gets bigger, you have another problem to face as well. So we're really kind of tempering our growth and services right now until things stabilize in terms of workforce and housing. So.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to come over here to Kirsten, a smaller employer, but you're having a similar challenge, it sounds like. Kirsten, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure, my husband and I have 3, basically 2 retail businesses and 1 small manufacturing business. We employ about 30 people, and it's a lot of younger people who like the active lifestyle, and some have a hard time finding land to buy, to build. You know, I feel like 30 years ago we could move up to Two Harbors or to any rural northern Minnesota community and buy some land and build a house, and that is just so much more challenging right now for young couples and young families to have that dream. And people need a lot of family support to work. I think, you know, the jobs that we can offer, and we just would like to see some creative solutions to that.
I think what's surprising about this is people think, oh, I'll get out of the cities, the costs will be cheaper, there'll be much more available. I'll live this kind of, yes, Paul is laughing at that. I'll live this kind of life that you can't have in the cities. And it sounds like, in some ways, the dream up here is kind of closing to people who would like to do it. Who would like to say something about that? Let me come over here. Yes, Kelly. Tell me your situation.
Hi, I'm Kelly Swearingen. I live up the shore in Grand Marais. Welcome to the Malibu of the north of Minnesota, right? Yeah, I think I was born and raised in Grand Marais, went away to college and accidentally came back, and I've worked at a great job there for 28 years at North Shore Health. We, again, like Greg, suffer from finding employees who can move there. Our housing market has basically gone out to VRBO and second homes. I can't fault anybody for selling their house for cash, right? Any one of us would probably do that if we had the opportunity, more than likely, because we try to better ourselves. But what it's doing is killing our communities. If you follow Grand Marais, we were noticed as the coolest small town in America about 5 years ago. We now just were noticed by Travel and Leisure magazine as one of the best small towns, I think, anywhere in the United States. So we get a lot of publicity, and there's kind of one way in and one way out, we tease, if you're not coming through Canada. And that's all the way up this beautiful landscape that we live in, but it's at a cost. And anybody who wants to live here, anybody who does live here is struggling to do that. The house I purchased in 2004, although we've made some generous repairs to it, I could sell for 3 times, if not more, what I bought it for in 2004. And that scares me. My 27-year-old son bought a house 2.5 years ago, luckily. He'll decide whether he stays or leaves eventually, because the jobs aren't keeping up with the costs. Our city council just set a preliminary levy at 7.19%. Our county set a levy at 9%. Our hospital just did their tax levy at an increase of $250 million. And when we have people who come from outside the area, second homes or VRBOs, they get irritated at paying some of those bigger costs, even though they paid $1.2 million in cash for their home. You know, our hospital has been called a Band-Aid station. I don't feel that way, and I don't think anybody who really came there would feel that way, but we're all struggling. And I don't know what the answer is. I have a few ideas. You know, I worked with city council for 3 years there as well, but it's gonna take more than one solution, and it's gonna take more than one group to figure this out.
Okay, you mentioned your 27-year-old son, and we have another 27-year-old who is here. She came with her mom. But I want to ask you, when you think about wanting to stay in the community, I mean, what are you hearing? What are you thinking about that, given how things are right now? And introduce yourself, if you would.
I'm Stephanie, and I think that there's no opportunity for housing here, nothing that I would even closely be able to afford with a college degree. It's just few and far between. It's easier, regardless of background, to just travel to Duluth for both employment and housing.
Okay, thank you. Well done. She's like, no, here she is. Right. Okay, so now I'd like to hear from some people who have been working on this housing issue for a while. I know there's a lot of people from the Housing Redevelopment Authority. Who can I talk to about? Yes. I see you, Jason. I'm coming back there. All right, introduce yourself, if you will.
Sorry, I'm Jason Hale. I'm the Executive Director of the Cook County Housing Redevelopment Authority. Hello, Kelly. Thank you for being here. Yeah, that's who I am. I used to work for the City of Duluth in housing as well, so I've been working on housing up the shore for about 10 years.
So obviously this isn't new to you. I think what we're really here to talk about is who's bringing some imagination, who's bringing some ideas and the money maybe to solve some of what we're hearing, and is it going to move fast enough? A lot of questions for you, but just reflect a little bit on what we've heard so far.
Well, I don't think it's going to move fast enough. We needed the housing 20 years ago. So with regard to I have to acknowledge we have Representative Scraba and Senator Hochschild here. Thank you both. We've had a historic year at the Capitol for funding for housing. Definitely. So I'd be remiss not to acknowledge that. The sort of catch-22 of that situation is we can put more money toward the problem, which we absolutely need. But what that doesn't do is solve the workforce issue with building the housing. So I saw this last week I was talking to a colleague in Duluth that was working on a project, and they were getting quotes back for about $400,000 a unit for modest townhomes for an affordable project. As you go further up the shore, it gets more expensive because you're further away from logistics, distribution, so folks are nodding their head because they know as you get closer to Canada, which Cook County is as close as you can get, it gets harder and harder. Like you commented earlier, you would think, oh, it'd get cheaper. No, it's not the case. Especially up here, we have a lake, bedrock, swamp, more or less, and clay. in the good spots. So I think it does take creative solutions. I know that our community is looking at doing some of those things. And frankly, just for 2 seconds, I think we have to look at this more regionally. I think that there are a lot of small towns in this beautiful part of the country, in the state, that need housing, but there isn't the bandwidth locally. There's not the capacity from a city or county level. People don't have the time or resources or expertise to do that. And we need to figure out a way to leverage the need a little more broadly to come up with solutions like, here's a 40-unit housing footprint that can get approved and fast-tracked, and we get a development team that goes and builds 10 of them in these 10 small towns. Like, we got to think a little bit bigger than we have been.
Okay, so let's linger on that for a moment. That's a really interesting idea. How would that kind of collaboration work regulation-wise and financial-wise? Right. He chuckles knowingly.
Yeah, that's the I don't know, billion-dollar question at the Capitol last year. I would just, I guess, try to succinctly say that there is will. I think we're all here for a reason. There's a will to do this. I know that the Capitol, we're trying to get creative. I know locally, I've talked with a number of colleagues about this conceptually, this idea of how do we do more modular, for example. There's a finite amount of people to build. We're all competing for the same small pool of resources. So I think if there is the will to do it, we just have to kind of get over some territorial, parochial, maybe arbitrary boundaries that we've created and realize, how do we do this for a region? And I'm selfishly looking at Northeast Minnesota. The whole state needs it. I grew up in Southern Minnesota. I get it. They're great. I'll worry about that later. Right now, though, in Northeast Minnesota, I think we need to look at, maybe it's the TAA. We can draw whatever boundaries you want. I don't care. But I think the will is there. The need is finally recognized now more than ever. And there's a lot of communities that are saying, what do we need to do differently?
You know, I'll come back. Some of what I'm hearing is knock down some of the silos that happen between municipalities and think about this in a broader sense. I'm going to come over here to Matthew. Introduce yourself, if you will.
Matthew Johnson, Lake County HRA Director.
What do you think when you hear Jason say, hey, there's a way, but it's going to require some creative thinking, and it's going to require municipalities to say, for the greater good, we're going to lift some of these regulations and do things differently?
I love that idea. My take on this is there's no one solution here. We need single-family housing of all income levels. The average house in the Duluth area that was built only 30 years ago, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, is $469,000. And as a representative from the HRA, the old mindset is that we're working with low and moderate income households. That's one of our goals, but we're also trying to get all levels of housing moving. And you're seeing multiple stakeholders come to the table offering assistance, whether it's land or grants or some sort of financial support from major employers. In order to pull off these developments, it's multiple people that are putting money on the table.
Okay, if that's happening though, why isn't this moving more quickly?
There's labor shortage for people that can build the homes. There's contractors that only want the large projects. There's high land costs. There's high construction material costs. It's the perfect storm for why we're in the situation we're in.
Okay. Who else? Oh, you know, somebody asked a really good question earlier, which is how we define affordable housing. What is it that you wanted to know? Tim.
Well, I always hear this thrown around, affordable housing. And if you try and say, okay, from your group, what are you talking is affordable? Because all I ever find is a formula, which means every house is affordable. It depends on the wage of the person buying it. You know, it may be affordable for you, but not for you. So, you know, I always see this term, but the term means nothing. It really means nothing because there is no set definition. What is affordable housing?
Let me go right next door here to Tom, and you are, Tom.
I'm Tom Furman. I'm the executive director of the HRA of Two Harbors.
How would you answer that question about what affordable housing actually is?
Well, I think you're actually right with the idea that affordable housing is different for everybody. I mean, it's kind of like the idea of putting natural on a label. You put natural, it means you think you know what it means, but it doesn't mean what you think it means. And I think affordable housing oftentimes needs to be defined more as labor force housing. Because labor force housing means that a person that's working on an hourly basis can actually afford this house or the apartment for the rent. These types of things do have still a wide berth because some people are willing to pay up to, $1,500, $2,000 per month for rent. I look at that and go, I don't feel that's affordable. I think that we need to actually start looking more toward the idea of labor force housing. What does the average person in our area make for an hour of labor? And then start deriving it backward from that. Because we can see, our group has looked at these in a lot of different ways. Our HRA has said that if we're not able to build a house for under $200,000, then that's not gonna go well in this area. And we know that we can do it for less than that as well. But now we just need to actually get, as mentioned before, the contractors involved and everything else. And that's a challenge because we feel like we can do this, but it does take a lot of time, energy, effort, work from us internally. I've got an incredible board that has members that are bending over backwards trying to make sure that we get these things going forward. But it is a big challenge, and trying to make sure we stay under that price point is really hard.
I think what we don't want to leave people with here tonight is, yep, it's a problem. Yep, we're doing some things around the fringes. But is that kind of where we're at, Tom? Or are there ways to really activate some of these ideas?
There are two things that we have going forward. We have made a deal with D.W. Jones, and D.W. Jones is going to be coming in, putting in senior housing. I know that somebody had talked about senior housing being a huge need in our area, and so we're looking at a 48-unit senior housing building called Evergreen. We ended up attracting that kind of a group to come in, and D.W. Jones, if you're not familiar with them, they're kind of like one of the gold star developers in Minnesota, especially northeast Minnesota.
Before you continue, what kind of incentives did you have to give them to bring them in?
I'm glad you asked. Our incentive was nothing but land. We talked to D.W. Jones. We actually put it on our RFQ. I worked very closely with Minnesota Housing Partnership, or MHP, and they ended up helping me along the way, and we crafted a really great RFQ, which means request for qualifications. We had 3 developers step forward and give us their ideas on what should be brought forward, and our board looked at them all and said, D.W. Jones has a stellar track record and a beautiful request. So we ended up offering them up land. They got to look at the 3 spaces just like the other developers, and they chose one that's over by August Omnibet Boulevard. And magically, things kind of worked out. It did take a lot of just working with them. Blood, sweat, and tears poured into the project so far. I've been out on the land and gotten stung by bees a few times, so it's all good. This is the thing you put in, though, to make sure that our community has something that's going to go forward. And this is a project that's going to start being built in the spring of 25. It'll be finished in the spring of 26.
Okay. Let me ask you to pause there for a minute. Do we have any seniors in the room tonight who are concerned about housing, kind of getting too expensive to stay, or you're looking for senior housing? I think I see some seniors here, but you're not in that situation. Ma'am? Yeah. I thought you might have a story. You are Kathy.
Right. Okay. My story is right now I got a nice place to live. I live on an apartment on Laura Lane. But the only way I can afford it is because my sister lives there too. She's 10 years older than me and she has dementia. When she gets to the point where I can't take care of her, I'm going to have to find a different place, and I cannot afford Laura Lane. I guess I don't know what to do, because if I apply for an apartment and get it, like Bayview, do I put my sister in a nursing home right away, even though she's not ready to go into one, or what do I do? I just don't know right now, so I just close my eyes and pretend it's not happening.
Sounds really difficult. Do you feel like you have some time to figure this out, or is this really weighing on you?
I have some time to figure it out. I'm hoping to get into the evergreen apartments. I saw the floor plan. It was really nice. It even has a dishwasher and a balcony.
All right, well, now you know who to talk to, right over there. See what happens when you come to a community meeting? I want to come over to Lacey. But yes, if I could just, thank you. So Lacey, tell me a little bit about your story.
Sure. I moved to Ely in 2019. I had been living in St. Paul. My background professionally is in higher education. I'm from Hutchinson, Minnesota, so I know rural. And when my husband got a job at Paragus Northwood's company, I was like, yes. I didn't know Ely, but I know rural. Right. There wasn't a job in my field available, but I got really involved with the folk school, and so I'm the board chairperson of the Ely Folk School, and I teach Slovenian Petitza if anyone wants to take that class. I manage a program called Boundary Waters Connect, which is grassroots economic and community development. I host a weekly educational forum called Tuesday Group, and we've hosted, I think it's 12 or 13 Meet New Elyites sessions in the last 2 years. We're seeing a big influx of new residents, and they're young people, they're willing to work gig economy jobs, they're willing to work seasonal jobs, but they're lacking housing. And I see, like from my vantage point, the Ely Folk School is a school. And the folk school movement is rooted in helping the peasantry be resilient. So I'm like, what qualifies as a modern day American peasant? But I do wonder about the regulations and what creative solutions could happen between my economic development work and my role with the folk school. And could we have a group of people take a class on how to build an accessory dwelling unit that I could have in my backyard, and I could house seasonal workforce, make a little cash, do it, I think there's a creative solution, but it's so over my head, and it's really over the head of my colleagues. I see what's possible, but I don't know how to get there.
I want to take this back to Jason, because this is interesting. People are saying, I could solve my little piece of the housing crisis if I built things in my backyard. Yeah. I mean, that's where we're at. Tell me whether that's part of a real solution. Maybe it is.
I don't think there is a solution. I think that.
And I said part of, the larger solution.
Yeah. I just mean to say that I think that this is a patchwork quilt sort of approach of, there's no silver bullet. Even like I said before, the money that the legislature gratefully approved for this. We need that, but that's one. There's the money, there's the land, there's the bandwidth locally, there's zoning, there's all these things. So there's the workforce. We could go on and on. Literally, we could talk about this for a long time. But I think that those things like ADUs, like she was talking about, that is part of a potential solution. And that's something I think locally where communities like I work with people in Grand Marais are looking at ADUs or Ely or any of these small, that's an option. The zoning has to allow it because you can want to do it, but if your town zoning doesn't allow it, zoning's not a sexy conversation topic, but it's a real thing that dictates what you can and can't do.
What does zoning say about this right now in the county that we're in? Can you do that? Anybody know? Where's our county commissioner? He's hiding. There he is. He's right that zoning isn't sexy, but boy, is it important when you're finding solutions. Does zoning let you do that?
Yes, as long as your sewer system is built to the size to take on another bedroom and your lot's large enough.
Lacey, you're good. You're right. Okay.
She lives in a different county.
So Jason just said it is, and I think we're gathering this. It's a patchwork of solutions, but again, time is of the essence, right? How long have you lived in this county?
My entire life.
Okay. So do you have a sense that things are moving quickly enough? What would solve one part of this in the next, let's say, 24 months? Is there anything?
Well, and thanks to our senator and our legislators this year, they put a lot of money into it.
They are buttering you up like there's no tomorrow here.
Oh, we're going to be back for more. But in the last couple of years, it has just because of the need. We've met with our manufacturers and that, and they said housing's number one. They need it, and the county got behind it, and we're dedicating quite a bit of money towards it too. But there's one missing part, and it's been alluded to a couple of times here, and that was, the Malibu of the North. We could build 1 million houses, and our children might never get a chance to buy them. So we have to get together as a community.
Because they're too expensive.
Right. There's people all over the nation that are going to outbid us with cash. And where it's national news, if you want to go to where it's cool climate, get by the lake, everything. We have everything that people want right here, and they just discovered it post COVID. So here they come. And so we have to, as a community and as councilmen and commissioners and legislators, we have to come up with a way that we can control who actually gets to live in the houses that we build.
Really? So if you want to buy a house for VRBO, or you want to only be up here 3 months of the year, you're out of luck?
Well, not necessarily, but that was the first thing that we tackled, and thanks to the municipalities in the area, they joined up with us, and we put a limit on how many VRBOs we're going to have in the area, because they were just swallowing up our housing stock. So, and they're part of the economics of everything, so you need to have some, but not everything. We don't want to be another Vail where the whole town has to move just because we got bought out.
I should say, as somebody who uses Airbnb and VRBO, that, that brings money into a community, and that's good for the economic life of the community too. You're hitting the balance, right? You're trying to find the balance.
That's exactly what we're trying to do, and I use them when I travel too. But I use a hotel. That don't mean every building needs to be a hotel. So we got to find a balance there, and we're flexible with it. If our housing stock increases, the number of VRBOs can increase along with it. So we already have that worked into the plan. But we don't need to be investing taxpayers' dollars into housing stock for somebody to buy it for a VRBO or for a second or third home because it's in a beautiful area. We need it for the people that need to be working in this area to keep our communities vibrant.
Okay. Yes, I thought I saw a hand. Did somebody raise their hand who wanted to add to that? I thought I saw that. Yes, sir. Yes. Introduce yourself, if you will.
Representative Roger Scraba. I'm from Ely. I used to be chairman of St. Louis County Planning Commission for like 12 years. I was chairman of Ely's Planning Commission. To answer her question, Lacey's question real quick is, if the zoning, if you have an R1, a residential one, you expect to have your yard, the neighbor's yard, in that. The city of Ely passed a VRBO 35 in an R1. That's all you can have. When they're gone, they're gone. And we put a tickler on it saying when you sell it, the permit doesn't go with it. You have to apply for the permit again. That way you don't get permanent VRBOs everywhere when someone's out. The problem with having little houses in the back of everyone's yard, it's no longer an R1. Now you're an R2 or a commercial. And it solves the housing problem, but it creates I want to be by myself in my yard, and the neighbor says, oh, I need the money, I'm going to sell it. And pretty soon you have this mosaic patchwork. You either zone an area where RT, residential transition, and say that's what you're going to get. There are ways around this.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up. That was one of the things I wanted to ask you about. Would there be a way to, in some of these communities where the pinch is especially sharp, to rezone areas and say, we're going to lift off a lot of the stuff that people complain about, even as they're complaining about not enough housing, and we're going to get creative on the zoning, and we're going to let some of these areas experiment with different kinds of affordable housing? Would it work?
Yes, and that's the whole idea of zoning. A zoning code is you sit and have your hearings, and you bring everyone together and say, are you willing to do this here, here, and here?
But the people that live on the edges of the new zoned area are likely to come in and say, I don't want that in my backyard.
Or they benefit from it because they can have it and the other person can't. It's a choice, you know. And eventually it works out. You might have someone vehemently opposed. I mean, they're going through it tomorrow night on a rezoning in Ely about a conditional use permit of RVs that we allowed 20 years ago.
People are turning off their radios right now.
And yeah, sorry, you know, but I'm watching this happen. And just to predicate, I go skiing every year for the last 28 years to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I get the Jackson Hole paper. I tried to bring it up. Housing development, the police, the fire, everyone can't leave and live in the city anymore. When I was mayor of Ely, I was like, I will never let this happen to our community. And now I'm a representative, and I'm looking at Silver Bay, Grand Marais, Big Fork, International Falls, Ely, Cook, Orr. They're all kind of what the commissioner said. People are coming up here going, hey, we love it here. And you know, your point about the VRBOs bring income and bring money, but so do workers, you know, and that's more every day. They're here. They're the ones that keep our grocery stores going, our bars going. Thank you, Castle Danger, you know. But I mean, it really does. And Grand Marais, you know, I mean, I feel for Grand Marais. I'm coming up to speed as someone, a mayor of Ely, and I got a lot of experience. So when I go to Grand Marais and I listen to the people in Grand Marais, you know, I'm like, well, maybe we're going to have to go up. It's because you can't go out. There's only 3% or 7% of the land is private. 93 is public.
Are you talking about building high rises?
Yeah, well, not so much high rises, but you can go to 3 or 4 stories instead of 1 or 2.
Let me stop you there. Is that a good answer? Kelly, I saw some cringing out there when he said that.
It's a part of an answer. We have a moratorium, so they cannot go above, I think it's 34 feet, if I remember, from city council time. We did some changes in zoning. AUDs are allowed within the city limits now for that. Where I would like to see change happen is our mixed use allows VRBOs. I would like to take that out of the city limits. That if people want to come enjoy the area, then go enjoy the area outdoors, but maybe not make it so easy for them to be 1 block from downtown. Let the people who work there want to walk to work, bike to work, whatever, be within the city, because it's really not that big. So it's a part. And I think, you know, the Lake County Commissioner, Jason, have all said there's so many parts and pieces, but they do take time, and that's the hard part, the frustrating part, because what I think works, he won't think works. He might have something different. She's going to say different. So it's trying to be accepting of all the ideas and seeing how they're going to mix for where you're at. And my idea and my solutions at my age is probably going to differ from somebody at Lacey's age or Steph's age. So there's a lot to it. There's no simple equation.
I'm KERRI Miller. You're listening to a Rural Voice Town Hall. We're at Castle Danger Brewery, drinking some great beer. No, that's after the town hall. And we're in Two Harbors, and we're having a lively and, I think, imaginative discussion about how to try to solve affordable housing issues, the tight availability, how to get more built, what do you do about seniors who want to stay in the community. How do you satisfy the residents' vision of what affordable housing is and what a community should look like? So, good conversation here. I wanted to come back to you, Greg, from the hospital. So we've batted around some interesting ideas, but they still seem like they are kind of in progress. So what is that going to mean for you?
Well, there's a couple things that come to mind. The one thing that you mentioned about affordable housing, what was eye-opening to me was talking to one of our physicians and knowing what physicians make in rural communities, and him saying, I can't afford the houses that's available, I just can't afford. because of student loans and their age and all of that. So I think of all of our other workers who make less. It's just even more difficult than that. The other thing I think about over the last probably 3 or 4 years, we've actually thought about getting into housing as a medical provider. And that's not something I never thought I'd be having a discussion about. What I kicked myself over was a house that went for sale across the street from us, and I brought it to our board and said, should we buy this house? And a couple said, what are you talking about? Why would we buy a house? We didn't, because we're focusing delivering medical care in Two Harbors and Silver Bay, but that's how desperate we get to think if we purchase the house, we could allow our staff, we could subsidize them living there, either rentals or maybe a rental to purchase, but we don't have the resources in the healthcare industry to be purchasing houses. That's not our mission, although it's related directly to it and the care that we can deliver. What about paying for childcare? That's also being discussed.
What was the last part of that?
The comment about paying for childcare. That's another issue we face with our young families and professionals.
Okay, so going over here to State Senator Hochschild.
Yeah, well, I would just say we have a history here in the Northland of having companies invest in housing. The mining companies built Silver Bay, single-handedly built the houses for their workforce. I don't think it's an absurd idea to consider going to our companies, going to our industries and saying, hey, do you want a skin in the game and do you want to help us make these investments? We talked a lot about the state investments. That was an important piece. We did $35 million for workforce housing, but I want to make sure that the Northland competes for that because it's statewide. And a lot of our rural communities, this is the most rural district in the state. I want to make sure Two Harbors and the other communities have access to that money. So we gave money to the Northland Foundation, one of the sponsors of this event, to help our rural communities acquire that funding at the state level. But I think it's not just funding, to Jason's point, it's figuring out the regulatory side. I was a city councilor in Hermantown, and I will tell you, NIMBYism, not in my backyard, is a big challenge. And we have to address that and talk about it. If people don't want things in their backyard, if they don't want a new senior housing complex, if they don't want a new housing development, if they don't want, I'll admit I own the lot next to my house. Maybe it should be a house. There are opportunities for us to consider that. Lastly, I'll go to the third rail at the state level, which is, what if we took the heat off of our city councilors and our county commissioners and did some zoning reform at the state level and said, you know what, Minnesota, I know in Washington state they've done similar moves like that where they have said there are certain zoning that we are just going to make statewide, certain lots, you can't go above this, you need to allow English basements, you need to do these certain things. I'm not saying I am for that, I need to do more research, but we're having
the research part of it.
No, but I mean, we have to talk about the hard things, and zoning and figuring out how we do those things, and talking about NIMBYism is a big part of that.
I was curious about the reaction in the room from the city council members and the other when he says, oh, we could handle this at the state. Rick, how's that sound?
I would think my constituency would rather have it handled close, but what would be nice is if all of our electeds from the township on up had a little more knowledge and leadership of it, because you can't let just one person shut down a project just because it's close to their backyard. If the community already chose the zoning to allow it in a certain spot, then it is what it is. That's where it needs to go. And so much happens now that 3-4 people show up to a meeting and scream about something, everybody cowers under it, and the project gets shut down. Where we already established the zoning, follow it. That allows us to do what we need to do.
Can I mention one more thing? We have the IRRB, which is an agency at the state level, which acquires mining money to diversify the economy. The only way we're going to diversify the economy here is if we have housing. So the commissioner of the IRRB, along with the legislative board that I'm a member of, have put in housing money for the first time, $5 million that we're looking to invest. The other thing we're talking about is this contractor issue and trying to get consistent work for our contractors. What if we had a state agency that made and guaranteed a certain amount of single-family affordable housing projects in these different rural communities on a cycle?
Let me ask you, what if you had a pool that people could be a member of, companies, contractors could be a part of, and the state would be assuring them that there would be work parceled out in different parts of the state? Is there a reason that wouldn't work?
No, I love that idea, and I think the IRRB and other nonprofit foundations could be a part of that.
Yes, sir. Oh, yes. Tim.
I'm retired out of the building industry. I was in sales happened to be a remodeler, but part of a building association that had many builders, both residential and commercial. And moving it to a state and doing that, there isn't a shortage of wanting to build houses. There's a shortage of workers nationally as well as locally that are willing to do the work, because contracting is hard work. And you know, like I said, I'm retired. My previous employer, 8 of the last 10 people they hired left on day one because it was a harder job than they thought it would be. And they were being hired as an apprentice. These are people who had no experience, and they were willing to teach them and pay them to learn where they wouldn't have student debt. And before lunch, 8 of the 10 left saying they didn't want to work that hard. And so they are turning down work not because they want to, but because they physically don't have the people to do it.
All right, there was a hand back here. Yeah.
Talk about the high school project. What kind of plays off of that?
Phil, introduce yourself.
Phil Arnold. I'm with the Two Harbors HRA on the board. And we formed a group, we called it the Ad Hoc Committee on New Buildings. And one of the members had the idea, he was from St. Peter originally, that the high school there had built houses in that community. So we made some connections, and the idea was, let's approach the Two Harbors High School. And the carpentry teacher and the principal were willing to give it a try. So there's a lot involved in a project like that. And it goes back to, what is an affordable house? So we tried to figure out, with Tom's help there, with income limits and so forth. So we came up with a goal of trying to build a house somewhere in that 140, 150,000, kind of a starter home, 2-bit. And we were lucky we had an architect that was in the community that was very excited about working on design and so forth. And now we have a second architect in the community that stepped forward to help with it. Anyway, the idea was to build the project at the high school where it could be built in sections, stored there, and then when we had a site ready, and it was going to be a slab on grade, then we would move it there, erect it, and then the interior work could be done later. We've gone through some iterations of trying to find the property and get the funding for this. The Lake County HRA has chipped in. Two Harbors has chipped in, and so we've got a start on it. And the first delivery of materials was made a couple weeks ago when school started. So we're hoping 2 things. One is that the students learn a trade where there's a shortage. Number 2, they're doing something for the community. And then the other ulterior motive is that there's a lot of tax-forfeited property in the city, and there's not buildable lots on it. So we're hoping to blaze the trail where more affordable lots will be created.
Phil, thank you. I'm going to go over here to the mayor because he hasn't spoken yet, but maybe. And he has a lot to say, I'm sure. Okay, Mayor, you've heard about some kind of, I think, interesting potential solutions, but you've also heard, how do we accelerate this? What are we going to do about people that say, well, I don't want that in my backyard? What's your reflect for a minute on what you've heard so far and how optimistic you are that you're moving into Solutionville.
Well, I certainly think that we've established the demand that's out there tonight. That's clear. The tricky part, as everybody's already talked about, is how we're going to meet that. A lot of things that I've heard. First of all, I applaud Phil and Tom and the work that they've done with this high school project. that was one of the first things that I had heard about when I started as mayor about 4 months ago, and I just think that's a great project. There's some hurdles to get over to do this, and that's important. We can't set that aside. And one of the things that I heard out there earlier is making sure that some of the either the zoning or some of the hoops that people have to run through, from a council standpoint, from a county standpoint, we start to consider what those are and how do we make it easier to get this thing to happen, to get these things to be built. I think that's one of the key things that we need to. And optimism-wise, I'm optimistic, but it's not an overnight thing. This is going to take some time.
Except that it sounds like a lot of this area is kind of out of time. Yes, let me come back here to, I mean, now it's seriously affecting the economy, workforces, right? Yes, Paul.
Thanks, Kerri. I wanted to flag two things. One was on NIMBYism. Once a community gets a reputation of being unwork-withable, there is such a target-rich environment of places that are ripe for housing, they don't need your town. They've got some other place that can go. So the more welcoming every community can be to lots of diverse kinds of development, even if they think they don't want those people or that kind of housing, the better off everyone is going to be, because northern Minnesota cannot compete against the metro in terms of getting in an attractive situation for a contractor. It has to be something where everything is, yes, what can we do to help you? What can we do to make this easier for you? What can we do to make this workable for our community and sustainable for the long term? The second thing I would like to comment on is the idea that we live in the breadbasket of northern Minnesota here. We have timber products industries. We don't have a panelized construction facility that can work as an ecosystem where it absorbs labor at different times of the year when it's low time versus high time. It can't absorb working with a high school careers teacher and working with career academies models so that they can come and learn on the job and work in that type of facility and create a steady pipeline where we can build a trap line of communities all across the Iron Range and all across northern Minnesota. It's time.
Okay. Who else would like to comment on what Justin, I haven't talked to you yet. Hi. So introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Justin Otzi. I'm a principal planner with ARDC and serve as the part-time planner for the city of Two Harbors.
Which one of these ideas or cluster of ideas that we've heard today is really practical from your view?
Practical.
Dead air.
Right. Sorry. You talk to the zoning administrator and you risk losing more listeners. There's been a lot of talk about different solutions. I think has been nailed. There's not one. And time, it's hard to make up time. The reason we're in this problem is we've spent 20 years not building homes. And so we can't just wave the housing wand and have all these units immediately. It's a wicked problem. It's really difficult to solve. That's why we're all here tonight. I'm proud of what we've done in the city of Two Harbors. We've gotten rid of R1 zoning. There's no single family zoning in the city. We've allowed ADUs. I think considerations around parking minimums is still impacting what's available. I know we're looking at different things like setbacks and especially in the downtown area, could that expand what our options are? There's trade-offs though too. And just because we can build everything, we have to be thinking about our quality of the lake and the trade-offs that come with stormwater. It's not just quick, and I know that's not easy or not the best solution. I started the question with practical. I think talking about a lot of what's out here and kind of getting that out on the same page and maybe making some of these regional connections, to put my ARDC hat on, I see this throughout the whole region. That it's hard to try to think of a regional solution because everybody wants to be first, right? How would the city of Silver Bay feel if Two Harbors got the first house and the next one was coming down the line? That's where it sounds great, but it's hard in practicality.
Paul, you had quite the reaction to that. Why?
Because we have to create an environment where we create region-wide wins and we celebrate the good things that happen in every single community. You have to have the willpower to do it, the humility to accept it, and then the fortitude to pay it forward.
Love that idea. One of the things that's very effective is when a smaller community hears the success stories from their neighbors. It really does help motivate them. And you know, one of the areas that hasn't been discussed tonight is the role that the nonprofits have. And I know One Roof is here, and they're very effective. And so I add them into the mix of, you know, local government. The planning and zoning needs to be set. The nonprofits need to be involved. The developers have to come to the table and put together. I mean, sometimes when you ask a developer to have 4 of their 40 into low and moderate income so that you can feed that, it's painful, and others will gladly do it.
I was curious about how open the developers that you'd like to have working in the region are to this idea that they also have to balance what they're willing to come in and build. In the cities, there's a lot of resistance to that.
David Drown is here from the city of Silver Bay, and he's working with a couple of different developers to try to get things moving. My take on it is it seems like developers realize that the price of yes means that a little bit of compromise goes a long ways. I'm seeing that open up, and traditionally a developer would come into a community, they didn't need that public engagement as much as they need it today. So as little as 20 years ago, they could build really what they wanted to, as long as it was playing by the rules with zoning. Today, they feel like it's a little give and take to get what they want.
Let me go over there and talk to David. Talked to him a little earlier. So, David, how about that idea that there has to be some compromise on what developers are willing to do?
I really thought sitting in the back row would help me avoid this. Yeah, developers are in this game to make money. And if you expect them to compromise, and that compromise involves not making money, you can talk a lot, but nothing's ever going to happen. I think it's impossible right now to build affordable housing. When I talk to apartment developers, the lowest number I hear right now is like $250 a square foot. Well, that makes 1,000 square foot, 2-bedroom apartment, you know, $200,000 a unit, okay? I'm working on a project in Duluth right now where the planning number is $450 a square foot. That translates to an apartment cost of $4,000. Well, $2,000 or $4,000 in this group, none of that is affordable. Now, you can dump a ton of money at a project and you might get it done, and it's probably what it takes right now. The projects that we're looking at, apartments in Silver Bay, involve dumping a ton of money at it. Okay, that's probably what it's going to take, and I think we're desperate enough to consider doing that. Silver Bay is kind of unique. We have a lot of affordable housing. It's a bunch of houses that were built by the mine 70 years ago, and their prices have doubled lately, but you can still buy a house in Silver Bay for 140 grand. In my world, that's affordable housing compared to anywhere else. The other thing Silver Bay has going for it is we have somewhere between 125 and 150 seniors living alone in a single-family house. That's going to change relatively quickly, okay? And if that housing can turn around to be available to workers and families, we've got a ready-made solution. If that in turn turns into people from the cities that are buying the second cabin in Silver Bay to enjoy the trailing system, it doesn't work. But I think the solution is to try to build something that the people that have some wealth in Silver Bay that are living in a house below their means, help them move into that. Affordability is less of a concern there. And then if we can do things to have that home that's available, be available to someone who'll homestead it, or someone's a worker in the community. That's where my mind is going to thinking about what tools does government have to influence who can buy a home. And we know the kind of people we want. We want people with kids in school, and we want workers. But how we influence that, I'm still working on.
That was valuable. When you say dump a lot of money into it, do you mean city government? Dump a lot of money into it, or who? When you're talking about developing these projects?
Well, I'm not an expert in state funding programs, but I understand there's a lot of money available out there. What I am an expert in, it's taxpayer money, but one way or the other, it's either federal money, state money, or local money. Tax increment financing is something I've done a lot of in my career, okay? Tax increment financing will enable government to pay to 10, 15% of the cost of the project, something in that range. Get IRRR money or some of the state money that's coming around, maybe we can get as much as 25% of the cost of a project funded with non-developer dollars. Well, that starts to take a $2,000 a month unit and gets it down to a, $1.4 thousand a month or something like that. Is that affordable? That's going to be the new affordable, I think. That's probably what it's going to take to work.
I just want to come back over here since you are my go-to for the evening. We're back with Jason. So what do you think when you hear David say, you really can't build affordable housing these days?
Tom's waving at me. Yes.
Okay.
So somebody made the comment earlier, like affordable. There are technical definitions talking about HUD, and the funding programs will dictate what that means, right? So usually in the housing industry, it's AMI, area median income, some percentage of that. There's different thresholds, but parking all of that jargony stuff, there is no, we gotta get hit with it two ways in rural communities. One, it costs just as much up here to build, sometimes more, 10% more than Minneapolis in a lot of cases, which surprises people. And then on the other side of it, our incomes are lower. So it costs more to build. The developer, owner, operator can rely on less rent, so the gap gets bigger. The things like TIF and other local resources, Minnesota Housing Finance, all these things that are coming forward, those are parts of the solution, but it's not sustainable. Every year that I've done this for the last 8 years, give or take, I've been like, it can't keep going up. And it's gone up every year. The costs have gone up. So there is, like, what we're doing is not working. The money we need, for sure, we have to rethink how we do housing in this state, honestly, like largely. The trades are not increasing as fast as we need them to. We need to think about how we do permitting design, how we do replication of building projects, like I mentioned. Like, if we want to make a big dent. Now, we can do the ADUs and we can do the programs that this gentleman was talking about, which are fantastic, and I'm trying to help that in our community too. But that, if we're talking about 300,000 units, which is the projection in Minnesota over the next 8 years or so, there's a scaling problem we have that we have to think a little bigger and more creative about.
Lacey wanted to say, and then I will be right back to you, Kathy. Yes, Lacey.
Well, I was thinking that we haven't yet talked about morality or ethics. And I have an anecdote of a couple of friends who were having a hard time buying a house in Ely individually. And they were able to form an LLC and buy a lakeside property from a couple who were willing to sell to them regardless of the fact that they were offered cash offers. And these people who were willing to do something really unique in choosing the choice that fit their values for their community. And, we talked to our friends, and we're like, oh, this is so cool. Let's talk about how innovative you are. And they're like, we're not innovative, we're landlords, But what's innovative is those people who sold to us, those people who are willing to forego a cash offer, forego a bigger offer, because they saw a group of 5 friends who live and work in our community, in the schools, nonprofit organizations, teaching music, serving kids, that nurse practitioners. Those folks were able to do something really unique because someone chose them. And I think that this whole conversation is lacking a shared understanding of what morals we want to move forward with.
And right here.
I think I'm older than most people here, and I grew up here. But this town was a railroad town. The housing stock was not there wasn't more housing stock than we got now, but there was more people, like 5,000. But the railroad had a YMCA that was also a rooming house, boarding house. There was a boarding house where the Bears house is on First Avenue. And a lot of the teachers at the high school would rent individual rooms in a private home. I don't know if that's allowed anymore, but when the railroad was here, it was okay because there was no zoning. I mean, we did what they wanted us to do. But there's solutions, because I know people, you know, you can say, well, nobody wants to live in a single room, but I know people who are couch surfing that would love to live in a single room, a boarding house, a bedroom that somebody is willing to rent to them. And that's, I mean, we had more people, so, and they were housed. So it can be done, but it's got to be done in a different way.
We are more than an hour in, and we've heard some fantastic insight and anecdotes. Is there anybody who has not spoken yet who would really like to say something about? Yes, sir. One Roof. Yes. Why doesn't she come over to me? Yes. Here I am.
Hi, so I'm Jim Philbin, Community Land Trust Director with One Roof Community Housing. We're a nonprofit, and we serve, we're part of that patchwork that Jason talked about, but we serve a very specific affordable housing niche, which is households earning under 80% of area median income. So basically, individuals, families earning between $25,000 and $50,000 a year. And so our model is called the Community Land Trust, where the land is held in trust and the home is sold to the family. And in that land lease, there's some covenants that ensure the home has to be owner-occupied, and the home has to remain affordable. And also then it focuses on the priorities of serving the people that live and work in the community. So the people we've been talking about, of the people that work in the restaurants or the hotels or the schools or the hospitals. And we are able to build a house that costs $375,000 to build and sell it for $145,000, which of course a private contractor isn't going to do, right? And that's because we fill that gap with the funding we get, city, state, federal. But the key is that once the home is built and developed, it's permanently in the land trust program. And so whenever it resells in the future, it always remains affordable, always owner occupied. So we have 350 land trust homes in the community. We have half dozen here in Two Harbors. We're doing another 4 or 5 here, some in Grand Marais and Grand Rapids. And it's really been an awesome model for helping folks today, but also each and every time those homes turn over, they're affordable to another family that's living and working in that community. So.
Thank you very much. Good to know how that's working. Okay, other people who have not spoken. Yes, Kelly. Oh my gosh, hi. Hey, what do you want to say?
Hi, my name is Kelly Ash. I'm the senior researcher at the Center for Rural Policy and Development from New London, Minnesota, Candiota County, north of Wilmer. It's really nice hearing everybody talk. We're having the exact same issues in southwest Minnesota. Actually, all of rural Minnesota are struggling with housing shortages and labor force shortages. I just want to acknowledge the reason why this is such a challenging issue is I don't know if we fully understand the significant change that we've seen in economic development. It wasn't that long ago when all the tool set in economic development was all about job creation. And we are no longer talking about that. Honestly, the next politician that comes with their banner saying, we're here to create great jobs, stop. Don't do that anymore. We need people. As of 2022, in the state of Minnesota, we had 0.4 job seekers for every job in the state. We didn't even have a whole body. It's worse in rural Minnesota. And so this issue isn't going away, and the reason that we're struggling so much with this issue is I just want to acknowledge, yeah, this is hard because we don't have any programs built to take on this problem, because all the programs that have been built are to create jobs or to support people that couldn't find a job, right? This is a whole different era. We still have DEED, Minnesota Department of Economic Employment and Development, as well as the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, that are still offering programs where an economic developer fills out an application to get a loan or a grant for. It's asking how many jobs will the initiative create, right? We're still in that mindset. So this is a whole new tool set. This is a whole new era, and it's going to take some time. And just don't get so stressed about it. It's really understandable. So.
You know, I've heard Kelly say that before, and that is, it's kind of antithetical to when you hear, you know, when you cover the state legislature, you cover city government, everybody's talking about job creation. So it's interesting to put that into the middle of this conversation. Okay, who else? Yes, sir, right there.
Hi, my name is Todd. I'm a resident of Two Harbors. I'm on the Planning and Zoning Commission here. In my day job, I'm a social worker at St. Luke's Hospital in Duluth. And it kind of was alluded to at the beginning of the conversation, but we haven't really gotten back to it, that if you look at Lake and Cook County, our demographics, we skew older than any counties in the state. We have large numbers of elderly people proportionate to our population. And I don't claim to have any solutions, but every day I see the problems. And David Drown talked about it, touched upon it, Kathy's touched upon it, is, we have an awful lot of housing stock with 1 or 2 people living in them, and probably shouldn't be living in them, because try to discharge someone back with orthopedic problems who now has to climb a very steep 27, step staircase to get to their sleeping area. What are we doing to encourage those people to seek appropriate housing? How are we greasing those wheels to assist them in finding appropriate housing? And any development of new housing projects, we should look at increased density of smaller units that are appropriate for the elderly, because that opens up that housing stock for workforce housing and for younger families with children that want to move into those houses, that would be appropriate for those houses, that have the time, the energy, and the resources to put the sweat equity into rehabbing a lot of these older, houses that are kind of falling apart.
It's a sensitive issue, though, isn't it? Because you might be telling someone, it's really time for you to move out of your family home, because we need it for younger families who are coming here.
You know how many times a day I have that conversation? Yeah. I also, there's younger family members that have moved away, and it's, yeah, mom can't live there anymore. But I don't know what to do. There's 30, 40, 50 years of accumulated history and items in that house that need to be dealt with. It's not easy, but are we investing enough in counseling these people into appropriate housing?
Okay, I saw somebody, yes, sir. Couple more comments, because I don't want to overwhelm my poor editor, who's going to have lots of tape to edit. Come on over here, sir. Right, but we can keep the conversation going as, all right.
Now, before you get mad, I am from Iowa, so, yes, all right, hey, all right, that's right, yeah. It took us a while, but anyway, I was able to have a construction company for about 20 years, specialized in residential commercial, and then I taught at Iowa Central Community College down in Iowa, and I taught carpentry and building science, and so we had programs, high schools, and then we'd lead them in and do dual credit, things like that. We built 2 houses a year, and then we ended up building 15 residence halls on our campus. We were able to use all the newest techniques. Our president let us do whatever we could for energy efficiency, codes, things like that. The biggest thing I have noticed, though, is when you look around the room, I'm close to the oldest, but there's not too many young ones here. And the biggest problem I had when I was teaching is that I had 46 kids in my program. And they started off, I would hire them at night, and I'd have 20 to 30 working after school. We paid them. The school would pay them, and I'd let them go wild with 3 or 4 backhoes. It was kind of nuts. But by the time I retired from the college, I only had 4 or 5. And the reason is all they wanted to do was go back to the dorm room, play with their thumbs. And the other thing, and my biggest issue, was getting kids to come to a community college, do a program that was going to make them more money than any of the teachers, including me, at the campus. And I was actually making more than the counselor at the high school that was telling me, we don't have those kind of kids go to a trade school. And so we've got to get, and I feel like I'm part of the community. I've been building my cabin for 10 years. My daughter should have a wing on this Castle Danger. They've drank so much beer down here. You know, and I buy all my materials here and everything. But, you know, I think we just really need to do the same thing here as we run into in Iowa. We actually are doing affordable housing down there now, $150 to $200 a square foot. But the thing is, a true affordability is long-term. You know, we're doing 4,000 square foot houses down there, 2,000 up, 2,000 down, with geothermal meeting the energy codes that are between $30 and $40 a month heating and cooling. People tell me you're lying. No, I just put up a slide. I used to do presentations, the Energy Design Conference in Duluth, and I put up a slide next to a passive house, and ours were just as good or better. So we need to just get the younger people involved, get them involved in this.
Okay, I'm going to ask Kitty if she will give us kind of a little wrap up. Please stick around and continue the conversation. There's cookies and desserts over there, and buy some beer from the amazing Castle Danger people. We're grateful they hosted us.
Thank you, KERRI. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. This is so gratifying to get to ask all of you to come here and come together. So many of you have interviewed and sat in meetings and listened to and written reports and written articles. You've given me tons of information that I've tried to share with everyone else. And my dearest hope is that now that you've sat in this room together and talked about really important issues that affect all of us, that you'll really work together to find solutions for all of us. So thanks, you guys, and have a drink and have some dessert. Thank you, KERRI.
I'll say one other thing, because this is all going to, 51 minutes of this is going to air on Minnesota Public Radio, and I will communicate with Kitty about when it's going to air, if you'd like to listen to yourself. All right, enjoy. Thank you.